This is my first time speaking at all. I would like to take the opportunity to thank the voters of Wicklow for supporting me and trusting me to be their representative in Dáil Éireann. I will endeavour to uphold their trust, and I look forward to working with members across this House towards a fair, equitable and sustainable future for all throughout our country. None of us could have imagined the scale and gravity of the challenges that would face us within weeks of being elected. The COVID-19 global health crisis has created a huge threat to our country's health, jobs, communities and economy. We have worked together quickly and collegiately to put measures in place to protect and maintain the fabric of our society through these difficult times. We've all witnessed the heroic efforts of our frontline workers in healthcare, the emergency services, community volunteers, retail staff and our civil and public service staff. These efforts and the community response to social distancing, to cocooning and other restrictions have helped to manage this emergency. For these actions we owe a collective debt of gratitude. As we emerge from this pandemic, bowed but not broken, we will seek to repair the damage that has been done, both financially and societally. And yet we must still address the existing crises, those of climate change, housing, health and other areas. While we seek to rebuild our fractured society with a sense of urgency, we must not overlook the opportunity to forge a new social contract built on principles of equity and sustainability. Climate change is a slower and longer-term threat to our health, our communities, our economy and the planet. The global impact of this virus and the united responses required to battle it have demonstrated how we can react and work together to defeat a common threat. The battle to reduce our climate-changing emissions, environmental degradation and biodiversity loss requires that same level of thinking, of commitment and action. We can no longer abdicate our responsibility to deal with this global challenge head-on. The state must take a leadership role in addressing climate change. The decarbonisation of our economy, meeting our carbon reduction targets and uniting behind the science must be at the core of all future government policies and the objectives to ensure our health and an equitable society. Minister, I wish to return to more immediate matters and ask you a number of questions in relation to finance, business and social protection. Minister, will you consider creating and financing an arbitration process for commercial tenants and landlords? As you know, many will face cash flow and liquidity issues as businesses are closed by COVID-19. And many of these businesses are unable to meet these rent demands at this time. An arbitration process will benefit both parties and create the breathing space for businesses to return to work and deal with outstanding rent costs in a manageable way. Minister, can you examine the implementation of a 6-month commercial rates write-off for businesses who are adversely affected by this emergency and make up for that shortfall to our local authorities? As businesses re-emerge, they will be faced by many challenges. Many will be unable to pay the deferred 3 months rent rates bill. This will have an impact on our local authorities, finances and their ability to fund vital public services. In general, the inadequate funding of local services is a matter of local authorities is a matter we must return to at another time, but in the short term any loss of rates will adversely affect their function. Minister, in relation to the reopening of businesses, which must be done in a manner that complies with best health and scientific advice, have specific plans been made to assist those enterprises with social distancing and other workplace modifications that may be required over a longer period? Can you increase the value and expand the business continuity voucher remit to include the implementation of physical distancing or other structural measures that may be required to allow trading to recommence? And finally, Minister, what measures can be put in place to assist the arts, festival, musicians and film sector, as artists and workers with casual contracts or dependent on the seasonal nature of this work will have little or no employment for this year? Are they eligible for pandemic unemployment benefit if contracts for upcoming work or seasonally reoccurring work have been cancelled due to COVID restrictions? I'm sorry, Minister, one final question. You're no doubt aware of the situation with Debenhams, where the company has served formal notice on redundancy on its Irish workforce, totalling around 2,000 people. Normally this starts a 30-day process within which negotiations between the employer and the unions take place before a liquidator is appointed. However, due to COVID-19, it is virtually impossible for negotiations to take place. Minister, can you see if the 30-day statutory period can be extended? This would allow for a longer period over which a negotiation could take place and increase the possibility that workers could achieve a redundancy agreement beyond the statutory minimum payment. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, and congratulations on your inaugural address. You may not be able to get to the 5 questions there, Minister, so you might correspond.
I'm going to do my best. Thank you, and congratulations on your opening address, and best of luck in your tenure here in this Dáil representing the people of Wicklow. In relation to, very quickly, in relation to arbitration, the Government doesn't have a role to play in between commercial tenants and their landlords, but I would say to any commercial landlord that they should appreciate the value of keeping a tenant, particularly keeping a commercial tenant when we move into a much changed economy as we exit where we are with COVID-19. In relation to a rights write-off, I've already put in place through the Department of Housing Protection and Planning and Local Government a deferral of rates for a number of months, but I accept, Deputy Matthews, that we are going to have to look at further ideas in relation to, in particular, how we can get smaller businesses up and running in the coming period. Part of that is your third question in relation to social distancing, in relation to how we can support smaller businesses in particular, in relation to opening up their businesses in a way that is socially distantly compliant, and that is something that the Government is considering at the moment, and will look at ways in which we can do it. But it's all contingent on public health guidance, and as the Taoiseach indicated earlier on, it does mean that it may be some time until many businesses can become operational. In relation to the arts sector, Minister Madigan announced a set of measures there a number of days ago to support the arts sector further. But it is the case, I'm afraid, that the pandemic unemployment payment is dependent upon you losing work at a particular point of time. That relates in turn to issues in relation to, for example, seasonal workers. And in relation to Debenhams, finally, Ceann Comhairle, I understand that the 1977 Act does not indicate that the consultation has to be completed within a period of 30 days. So that Act may give some of the flexibility that the Deputy is looking for, and the Workplace Relations Commission are available to deal with matters of this nature.
Thank you, Minister. A lot of ground covered there. Deputy Jed.